Okay, and welcome to another episode of the Whole People Group podcast. Today, I'm joined by Maxine McKenzie. Max is an associate of ours. Max, we've known each other for a little while now. Max is a Feng Shui consultant, and she's also the co-founder of a color consultancy, Interiors. Max, I'm really looking forward to having a conversation today, just to set everybody up with Whole People Group. We recognise that organisational excellence is deeply entwined with the well-being of its people, and our mission is to seamlessly integrate well-being with performance, because we understand that when individuals thrive, so does an entire organisation. Max, really been looking forward to talking to you. I think we're going to have a great conversation about something a little bit different today.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't be so different in 5-10 years time, but I think this is an ahead of the curve sort of conversation. So Max, do you want to tell the listeners and myself, actually, because it's always nice to hear a little bit more about yourself. I've sort of framed this question as the wins, the losses, the whole people way.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Thanks. Really looking forward to having this chat. So I've had a 30-year career in brand marketing and communications, and sort of recently, well, in the last couple of years, have changed my life in some ways, kind of gone through a bit of a transformation into what has really always been in my heart, which is working around, energy. So I trained as an energy healer many years ago, and I've done lots of other trainings and different sorts of had different sorts of experiences in that realm, and so I just decided that the universe was really pushing me to kind of make this my day job. Finally, after many years of it being just something I did for my own personal development. So, and that sort of led me to Whole People, and I'll tell you why. As I said, I did a energy healing training and been on lots of retreats and workshops and lots of programs and spiritual practices and self-development. But no matter how much inner work I did, I kept returning home to spaces that didn't support the changes I was trying to make. I remember for my energy healing training, I used to go on retreat to Wales about every 8 weeks. And that was, blissful. It was on a kind of country estate in Wales, literally. And then I remember coming back into London and my vibration just kind of getting lower and lower and lower. And then coming back into the home where, at the time I was having some relationship issues. So it was a little bit toxic, and definitely not particularly supportive, let's put it that way. And I just felt completely disorientated. Like my home environment wasn't matching that vibration that I had when I was on retreat. And I remember coming home and literally having a glass of wine to just kind of bring my vibration down back to where the everyday. And then I had a similar experience with therapy, 10 years of weekly sessions going to, actually they were in real life mostly then, going to my therapist and then coming home to an environment that kind of energetically just pulled me back into all the old patterns, all the old behaviors. I didn't really know what conditions were needed for proper rest and good sleep, or how much my environment was affecting my well-being. And as I say, sort of relying on food, comfort food and wine to kind of, and crap TV to take the edge off. And then equally, I was doing my day job at the same time. So the offices I was working in were leaving me equally uninspired, kind of just largely cold grey spaces that, what they're like, they just drain the life out of you. And, looking back, none of it was aligned with the direction I was going in, and certainly how I wanted to feel. And it didn't feel supportive. So the thing that started getting me to look at spaces differently was when I was working for RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. And, architects are amazing people, visionary, problem solvers, actually. It's problem solving through design, which is, very fascinating subject. And I started to get insights and understanding into how the design of spaces and places affect people, and I think it was Winston Churchill that said, we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. And I think that's, so true. And then following on from that, the big win was discovering Feng Shui, because I suddenly found I had a framework, a kind of an ancient wisdom, a language to kind of put to what I was experiencing, the notion that, you need, aligning all the natural forces to work in harmony with you and your environment was something that people have been talking about for thousands of years. I wasn't going mad. And so, that shift really led me to training Feng Shui, and then led to the creation of interiors, and has kind of led me to whole people.
Brilliant, Max. I really I love hearing you speak, because I can feel there's two parts of me listening to you. There's like my cultural part, right, which is like council estate, Chelsea Football Club, and I can almost hear my ancestors going, vibration, what's that? Like, what do you mean energy field? Like, and then I've got this other part of me which I've managed to nurture in my recovery, which has come to understand. And the word ancient is just the perfect word. These ancient wisdom, and people think wisdom is like a man, or usually it's a man, right? A man, not a wise old man. They don't realize that wisdom is an intelligence that flows through everything, and that there's, wisdom is what enables a female body to be able to give birth, and it's what regenerates nature and the seasons and this. So I can feel these two parts of me listening to you. One part thinks, I mean, how bloody brilliant, right? Because that this stuff works. And I think the most exciting thing is it works, and it's like, you don't need to know how electricity works to light up your room. Exactly. Right? You can just turn the light on, and no one knows how it really works, but it still lights up a room.
Exactly. And just to that point, Simon, so I'm a council estate kid too. And, so I get where you're coming from. Vibration is a bit of a poncy word, so feel free to edit that out.
No, but is it? I don't. But Max, I don't think it is. I think, and this is, I think we should keep using that word, and I think the more we use it, the more people start to relate to it. Because I've got like 65-year-old male equity partners as clients, and if I use the word vibration, but I keep using it, eventually they start to feel right. Yeah. So Max, what is the big issue that we are facing at the moment in our culture? So let's look at our culture. So we come from the council estate bit, and then we go into the corporate bit and the bit in the middle. What is the big issue that we're facing?
So from the point of view of, the purpose of whole people, and this is why I was, when we met and you got it, I was like, okay, found my tribe, these are people I can definitely get on board with. We are more aware than ever of the importance of well-being, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual even, and people are investing thousands of pounds, huge amounts of time and money into therapy, retreats, coaching, self-development programs, business programs, all of that good stuff, all fantastic. But no one is talking about our environment, or I certainly don't hear it. I don't feel like, I go on LinkedIn and there are many, many coaches, many, many therapists, many people doing great work. But you don't really hear them, even if they're not using the term Feng Shui, which, may have some connotations for some people, or a kind of hangover from, decades ago when it was kind of, seen in a particular light. But it is about, the environment we're living in, the places that we spend most of our time, because, we don't live at the retreat. We don't live on the Zoom call with our coach. We might feel great in those moments, but then we're back in our home environment, and that's where we spend most of our time. So we're doing all this inner work, but then spending most of our time either in a workplace or at home that's not mirroring us in a way that is any way beneficial. It could be cluttered, it could be just draining, it could be holding on to old energy, it could be holding on to old stories of who we are, or simply just not aligned with, the life we're trying to create, the changes we're trying to make. The places we live in and work in, they're either supporting our growth or they're sabotaging it. they're not neutral. They're never neutral. So there's a sense that, well, it doesn't really matter. That's not what's important. It's secondary. Not true. You know, they can either be a kind of really rich resource for helping us move forward, or they will keep us stuck where we are. You know, so there's a gap, I think, at the moment, and it's a big gap. And I don't know how much more progress people can really make unless the gap starts to be addressed.
I love that.
Yeah, there's another a feng shui teacher. I'm not going to claim credit for this because I'm quoting her verbatim. One I really admire, who said, "No coach, no therapist, no course is going to permanently outwork a space that's working against you." You know, controversial to hear, but you know, and no one's saying those people aren't doing amazing work. Of course they are. It's really just getting them, as much as the end user, if you like, to think about this, you know, just start to make it a maybe, you know, so that we can have the conversation.
God, that's brilliant. I think I've shown you that meme before where there's a koala hugging on for dear life to a tree stump.
Yeah.
And there's all the tree stumps. There's no trees, right? There's just stumps. And then there's a man with a clipboard and a suit. And the speech bubble says, "I think this koala has a mental health problem."
Yeah.
Right. And there's just no trees.
No trees.
And I you know, you've really made me think about this in the last 6 months, because I think we run around with a fundamental belief that there is something wrong with us because we are so separate from what we're meant to be. I mean, we are nature. We come from our mother's wombs. We're made of matter.
Yeah.
And I think we are in this symbiotic relationship where with the fresh air, green, just the color green,
Absolutely.
right? Just the color green alone. I know that because when I went to spend some time in Bali, right, I just started to feel different because it's so green, right? And I was in London not long ago at an offices doing some coaching, and I was taken up to one of the offices to do my coaching sessions. And I live in Somerset, right? We've deliberately moved to Somerset. We're miles away from everything because my wife gets this stuff. I go into the office and I'm in a tube going, I can feel my body moving at 1,000 miles an hour. I walk through Bank, right, which is the financial district. Everyone's dressed in grey. There's like one guy with some colourful socks. Right? And I think, go on, mate, you know, like, and then I go up the lift and it's a clean, but you know, clean. You're one moment away from sterile.
Yeah.
It's so clean, it's sterile because there's such a fear of germs and that sort of stuff, which is life. We're made of germs in the gut. I go up into this office, and who was there said to me, "We've got you the best view, right? The best view in the offices," because I'm doing these coaching sessions, and I'm like, "All right, yeah, nice." I go into this corner office, and it's a view of the financial district of London. There's no green. It's just it's a grey view. And then I coached there, and I had all these men, mainly men, coming to me going, "I feel like shit. I feel like shit. I feel like shit. I feel like shit. I feel like shit." And I'm like, oh my God, you're plugging yourself in every single day to all of this. And I feel incredibly limited as you know, I call myself a coach.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, I'm now moving towards trying to get out and, you know, when was the last time you went for a walk? Just walking around the block and just breathing some fresh air, if we're not doing those things.
And that's the thing, really. You know, anyone that thinks that all this stuff is woo-woo or whatever you want to call it, all I would say is walked in a room and thought, oh, I don't really like the vibe, you know, or gone into a meeting and thought, yeah, something's off, you know, you're basically picking up on energy, you know, it's that simple. You know, if you've ever walked in your house and thought, oh, or there's a room in your house that you don't like, you know, or something, you know, you're picking up on energy, you know, that's what it is. And the other thing that I think really brings it home is, as you said, it's all taken from nature. Very few people would argue that a walk in a green space is not beneficial, that a swim in the sea or a swim in a lake, or, you know, expose yourself to plants and trees and water, or sitting around a campfire. I mean, these are all essential things of nature that make us feel good. That's feng shui. That is feng shui.
And that's brilliant that you put it like that, you know, and I think half of this stuff is debunking, and it's just becoming a bit better. it's just becoming a bit easier to be spiritual, right? And we don't realize how spiritual nature is and these things that we need is. I remember being with a Balinese Zen master, and he didn't say much. Jess and I were going to spend time with him, and he said to me, he goes, Simon, when you breathe in, the trees breathe out. And he went, no trees, no Simon. And I went, just like the best Zen lesson. I was like, oh my God. He went, your lungs and trees' lungs, one lung.
Oh my God. There you go.
One lung, right? And I think I sometimes like, when I breathe in, the trees are breathing out. When I breathe out, the trees breathe in.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like this
the one
movement.
Yeah, just the flow and the movement. That is feng shui. There you
That's
go.
feng shui.
You put it
Brilliant.
so well.
But I also will tell you now, Max, I've had clients who I've done some breathing with them. And it takes me about 20 hours of trust building to do breathing with them because they're so skeptical.
Yeah.
And I remember doing one breathing session with a client, and his whole body was flooded with oxygen. His mind changed, and he felt amazing.
Yeah.
And then the next session, I came in thinking, right, we've cracked this now. We can start talking about mindfulness, meditation, nature, all this feng shui, you know, how to connect. And do you know what he said in the first 5 minutes? We're not going to do that breathing shit again, are we?
Well, his mind was taking a while to catch up with his body, but you know,
right.
Hopefully he got there eventually.
So Max, tell me, how does your, and I know you've touched on this, how does your work, this work that you do with us, the interiors, the feng shui stuff and the color stuff that you're doing, how does it approach this issue that we're facing?
So we see it as there's a sort of intersection really between, you know, energy and well-being and design to some extent. So we're kind of take a blended approach to work with all three of those, you know, kind of harmoniously, helping people align that space with their goals, whether that's, you know, whatever their goals are. Could just be as simple as better sleep, because good rest, you know, is a foundation for so many other things. You know, more clarity, a new relationship, a career shift, doesn't matter. You know, there's you know, there are ways that we can work with your environment, but also we kind of recognize that it's their space. So part of the cure, and they're called cures in feng shui, so I'm not just sort of throwing that out there, is to get people to kind of creatively explore their own aesthetic, make intentional choices about how they have their space, about color, design, you know, layout, meaningful objects. So it's fun, you know, it's a form of creative expression, and maybe it's the first time they've done anything in their home with intention, you know. So that's the sort of journey we take them on, you know, and we look at how energy moves through their home, their workspace, how it affects mood, focus, well-being, and then, as I say, we work to make intentional, often subtle changes that create real shifts. How the wisdom is applied, there are some universal principles, as there are in nature and, you know, with all of this type of work, but how it's applied is determined on a client by client basis. So it's a completely bespoke service. Yeah, and that's kind of what we do. And I guess what I would say really at the heart of it is that, you know, for people to understand that their space is part of their story, you know, and it is part of their transformation, you know, and if they want to feel better, live better, or create lasting change, your space, whether it's your home or your workspace, needs to come with you on that journey.
I love that. I love that. And what I'm hearing there as well, there's so much space there for it to be deeply personal.
Yes.
You know, for it to have that real personal, you know, I have little things like this wizard just sort of sits there right now. I've actually been quite embarrassed at times when I've thought if people actually saw what my space looks like, I would be quite embarrassed. And for that reason, it's very personal and very private.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, if you were to be in this room with me, you would get a real inkling into who I am and the core of my being. And I've consciously done that. So when I walk in here, I feel like I'm a bit more connected to myself and also
Wonderful.
the child within, right? Like to allow that child out in the space. So many people, Max, I speak to don't have a space.
Yeah.
They don't have a space. It's all just, they don't have a space that is theirs or a space in the house or anything that's sacred or consciously designed. You know, it's just all seems to be plonked together, and there's no real intentionality there.
Yeah, and that's you're not, that's not loving yourself. Part of loving yourself is to give yourself those spaces that support what you're trying to do. You're doing really hard work. You deserve a space, that makes you feel good, that supports what you're doing. It's part of our webinar actually that we've created for whole people, but we talk about, people at most, they're probably worried about what's behind them when they're on a Zoom call. No one ever thinks about, apart from you and probably a few others, no one really thinks about what's in front of me. What can I see when I'm on the call that are cues to make me feel confident, or to make me speak up, or, to make me feel relaxed, So that's one of the things we look at, is what can you see, not just what's behind you that everyone else can see.
I love that so much. And I've actually got, and I'm going to be a little bit, I've actually got, look, you can see the green. And I've got my Buddhist and my prayer flag. So this is what I see behind everybody. And it means that when I'm coaching or speaking to someone, I feel like I've got this panoramic nature view, so it's nice to have that affirmed too in my space. Max, we've only got 1 minute left. I'll put you on the, I didn't put this in the question too much. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit more. So I know you've had some time to prep. This actually came up for me a few years ago, where I had a near-death experience, and it was really real. And the thing that came up for me is I didn't know what I was here to say. I didn't know what my message was, right? And that, the dying in that place, there's two things. One was the unhealed stuff that you have in relationships. Right, you want to die with good relationships, and then the other thing was like almost like leaving something behind. Like, what are you here to say? And there's a bit more depth to just the question than I told you before, right? So, what's your message as you currently stand? Like, right, what are you here to say in 10, 20 words? Like, what's the key, the core of your message?
Well, I mean, at that kind of really deep level, you've sprung it on me. I think it's to really, really feel that connection, really feel that connection to your environment. It will serve you well, if you work with it consciously, you cannot go wrong.
You need to write that down. If you didn't write those words, that's the one. And all those words are bloody brilliant. Thanks, Max. I'm inspired to go and work with my space. It's been brilliant having you. I'm going to press stop record, and then I'll just spend 30 seconds with you before we go. Thank you so much, Max.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure.